Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Falcon Oil and Gas Limited Investor Q&A session. Throughout this recorded session, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. If I could please ask investors to hold off submitting any live questions until the team have addressed those that were pre-submitted, just to avoid duplication, that would be most appreciated. And the company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so, and these will be available via your Investor Meet company dashboard. I would now like to hand you over to CEO Filippo Quigley. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon and good morning to some, and thank you, Jake, and thank you all the shareholders on this afternoon. You have myself, CEO, and Tom Lehman, based in Austin, Texas, who's our technical director, non-exec director. So look, again, thanks and welcome everybody. I wish I was here bringing you much better news than you probably would have read from our press release this morning. What the purpose of this meeting today is, we did have our AGM this morning. We had the formal AGM, and then we had a Q&A around this press release. My proposal for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so is to kind of just give you a quick overview of the press release. And there's a number of pre-submitted questions on the press release, which myself and Tom will then handle those questions and hopefully answer them as best we can. And then after that, we'll open up to the live session in terms of submitting your own questions. But as Jake said, if you can just hold off a little bit until we've gone through the already pre-submitted ones, it might cover some of the questions you do want to ask. So again, apologies in terms of the news. It is a bit disappointing. We had and were, as you all know, hoping for this to be the well to give us our commercial flow rate, which we had said as Falcon, we were hoping to be in the range of about 3 million scuffs of gas a day, or 3,000 MCF. When we drilled the well, Case cemented it back, literally almost before Christmas Eve. We had a really, really good well drilled, and we were feeling pretty confident and excited. And then we went out in March, April, fracked that well, 25 stages, and again, feeling very excited and confident about it at that stage. We put the well on production in early May, in the first week of May, and despite all of what had gone on beforehand, we didn't see the kind of flow rates we had expected. And also we didn't see the kind of water recovery we would have expected to come back at the earlier stages that we'd seen in our previous Amungi well and was seen in other wells. So our press release today is having run a production test for the last 50 days or so. But in the meantime, having sent some analysis back to a lab, and the lab actually is in Texas. Tom knows the lab, I think, pretty well, or at least knows the personnel and their track record as being one of the top labs you would want to go to. We have, as I said, unfortunate news in terms of the flow rate, but we think we know what the problems are. They are all around the completion process. And we stated categorically in our press release, it is not a reservoir issue, not any issues concerning the quality of the reservoir. It's more to do with the methodology, completion techniques. And Tom will talk later on when we talk to some of these questions that have been submitted. And as Tom, I think, has overseen the drilling and completion of something like 4,000 wells. You'll always learn, particularly in the early stages, on how different ways and different methodologies of completion interact differently with different shale plays. And that's part of the learning process here. And the lessons I think we've learned on this well, combined with all our previous learnings in the Beetaloo, I think will set us up extremely well for the forward program. And if there were mistakes made, as opposed to just learning, I think we'll learn both from the mistakes, but also learn from our learnings if you understand the difference. In terms of the forward program, we do have a forward program. This is a bit of a setback. We do have a forward program. It's a 2-well program. The first of those 2 wells is stepping out to an area, it's about 60 kilometers south, called Shenandoah. It will be off the same pad we used for the Kayela well 117. So we have the convenience of being able to use that pad, but it's obviously at a completely different depth than the Kayela play. And it's deeper than the Amungi, which is about 2,400 odd meters, and this will be 3,200 meters. So we're pretty excited about that. That is part 1 well of a 2-well program we'll be drilling this year. And the second well then is go back to Amungi. And, going back to Amungi, I hope demonstrates to people that there clearly is no issue with the reservoir, with the geology around the Amungi area. It was a completions issue. And, that will take us, into the end of the year, while hopefully we're coming back with what should have been the news today in terms of commercial flow rates. And that is the objective of this new work program for 2023, to drill 2 1,000-meter horizontal wells in 2 locations, complete those wells, get them on testing, and hopefully get results by the end of the year. And by results, I mean, the results we've all been waiting for. And our bar, our hurdle for commercial flow rate on 1,000 meters still remains at 3,000 MCF a day. So that's hopefully where we will end up by the end of this drilling campaign. And we'll update the market in the next couple of weeks. There's a bit of fine tuning between ourselves and our JV partners. So it's all been agreed in principle, and there'll be a formal approval of that in the next couple of weeks. And then we'll come out to the market to confirm exactly this is the work program and give you a better idea when it's going to kick off, but it is going to be kicking off as soon as we can. We have a rig available in country, the H&P rig that Tamarin brought into country a couple of months ago. So we will be using that rig, and we will be drilling 2 wells this year. So we'll have plenty of activity. So I think that's kind of enough on the press release. If I maybe then just start perhaps with the Q&A session. If I hand back to Jake. Jake, you have some of those questions, I think, in front of you?
Philip, absolutely, and thank you very much for that, and Tom as well. Obviously, we did receive a number of pre-submitted questions, so as you say before, maybe turning to those live ones, it'd be great to tackle these. And perhaps if we dive just straight into it. The first question that we have here reads as follows. The well averaged less than 1 million a day. What was Falcon's expectations going into this well?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Look, I mean, I think we've always said the flow rates, that we would expect was going to be in the order of 3 million a day. And this was based on a number of factors. First, we had the production logging test results from Amungi 1 back in September 2021, and they indicated flow rates over 5 million a day. Secondly, as I said earlier this afternoon, we drilled, cased, and cemented a really good 1,000-meter horizontal section. And we knew we weren't going to encounter, the issues that we had, for example, in the Amungi 1 around the casing deformation. And then we thought, as I said, we'd executed a really good completion of the well, fracking 25 stages. But yeah, it's certainly below our expectations. But, in answer to the question, we did expect 3 million, and we're just sub 1 million. So it is unfortunate. And but ongoing analysis suggests, that we think we know the reasons for it, and we can move forward and hopefully deliver the success on the next well.
Thank you very much for that, Philip. Perhaps just turning on to the next question, which asks, how significant is the lower than anticipated water recovery at 10%, and what level of water recovery would you have expected?
Yeah, water recovery is, that's part of the problem. It's not the main problem, but we would have expected much higher levels of frac fluid flow back, water flow back at these earlier stages. Only having 10% of many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of barrels of water pumped into the reservoir, that is always going to hold back your gas flow until you get a certain amount of that lifted up. Is that 20% or 30%? But certainly we're below expectations. It's unfortunate. It's part of a problem, but it's not the cause of the problem. It's a symptom of the problem in terms of the completion, that we didn't lift this amount of water. There's probably a few things we might have learned as well in terms of when we open up the well, getting more assistance from the pressure within the reservoir to drive out water at a higher rate at the earlier stages. And again, that's part of the learning process. So yeah, it's below our levels at 10%. We'd like to see it 20 to 30. Certainly you might see a much higher gas flow. But as I said, it's not the root cause of the issues we're currently dealing with.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Just moving on to a few questions that we have here, which are similar in theme, so perhaps we can take these sequentially. The first question asks, can you tell us more about the test results back from the lab?
I'll hand over to Tom for anything on lab. I think maybe Tom, if you wouldn't mind, or related matters.
Yeah, certainly. Well, as Philip said, from the flow rates and the water production, we knew that and some of the early work from the lab, we got a pretty good indication that there was formation damage during the completion stage. The lab is looking at several different causes for the damage, and that's what we're waiting on for those results.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tom. And perhaps just sticking with that, another question that we have here asks, can you elaborate a bit more on the potential causes of the damage?
Well, we need to let the lab do its work first, and then get with Tamarin and all the engineers and figure out the right course of action, the next course of action. And then Philip and Tamarin, I'm sure, will update the market as soon as we have a new plan.
Thank you, Tom. And Philip, perhaps just whilst we're on that, when do you next look to update the market?
As soon as possible is the short answer. When will that be? Probably in the coming weeks, not months, certainly. Sometime in July, we'll definitely be back to the market. The analysis in itself, it's kind of subjective. I mean, the guys that are doing the work, I mean, they are, as I said earlier, they're top of the class in what they do. But, analysis like this, it just takes time. And even then it might lead to, some further requirement for more sampling and more testing, but it's not that it's going to run forever, never, never. I suspect we'll be back to the market in the month of July saying, look, this is what we've realized as the issue, and here's what went wrong, or here's what we've learned on the completion. So, but as I said at the beginning, we'll update the market as soon as possible, which will be July.
That's great. Just turning on to the next question that we have here. How sure are you that this is not a reservoir quality issue?
If I can ask, Tom, can you?
Yeah, I'll take that one. To date, there's nothing we've seen that would tell us that it's a reservoir quality issue. We know from the Amungi 1 reservoir was not an issue, and when we were drilling the 2H, we had good gas shows, via the mud log. So that leads us to think that it's not a reservoir issue. That it's likely the skin damage caused by the completion process. And I know there's some questions as to what the heck skin actually is. Skin damage is a reduction of permeability of the well in the near wellbore. It doesn't reach far out into the formation. So this is a near wellbore phenomenon. And that's what the lab is working to try to identify what those causes are, and then what can we do to fix it.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Tom. The next question that we have asks, what type of cleanup work could be carried out, and when is it likely to be done?
Yeah, well, so we're waiting on the lab analysis for certain before we can answer that. And once they do identify some potential causes, and there's never a firm answer, or there's often not a very firm answer, but we need to evaluate those results and then look at what a potential cleanup operation would do, and whether it would justify going back in to do the cleanup operation.
Thank you, Tom. And perhaps just sticking with you there, a related question asks, surely if the lab can identify the problem, you could do cleanup work to solve the problem and get the well to flow at rates closer to your expectation.
Yeah, everybody has expectations, that's right. But there's no guarantee that just because we identify the problem that we go in and try to fix, that we're going to get 3 million a day out of the well. The big deal, the real learning is getting the JV to understand the problem and the root cause of the skin damage. And the real win is when we can, on the going forward basis, that we take those learnings and apply them to our upcoming wells. As we're also looking at that A1H well pretty hard again to see if there's some things we can learn to do differently as well. So it's not a guarantee that there's a fix, but we're going to be a lot smarter than we were before, we think.
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. And perhaps, Philip, if I may come back to you, a question here that references the press release and asks, how firm is the 2-well work program referred to in your press release? And when do you expect the JV to approve it?
Yeah, thanks for that question. The 2-well program, it's pretty firm at this stage. It does, as I said in the press release, require formal approval by the JV, and that's going to happen, in the next couple of weeks. But we as a JV, we've met, we've discussed it, we've gone through it in detail, and we've agreed it in principle. And we hope to be out spudding the first of the 2 wells certainly in Q3, and then follow that up by moving the rig back up to the Mungie area to drill the 2nd well this year. So yeah, it's a pretty firm program.
Thanks, Philip. And perhaps just staying on the 2 well program, how long more is Falcon carried for, and will you be carried through all of the 2 well program?
Yeah, it's one of the best carries ever, isn't it? And I keep saying it because it's one that just keeps giving. We've been carried with this project since 2014, in terms of Origin stroke, Sasol stroke, Tamarin stroke, everything. Prior to that, we were carried by Hess, but yeah, we've been carried forever. And the carry still goes on. At some point it's going to run out, but not today. And also I think it's worth noting that part of our negotiations with Tamarin last year, if you remember, we got a top-up of a gross carry of $30 million as part of a negotiated position in walking away from our certain preemption rights on the deal they did to acquire the assets from Origin. So, but as I said, at some point, maybe before the end of this next well and the start of the 2nd well, the current carry will run out, but that will still leave us with a balance of that 30 million I referred to, because about 16.6 million of that only kicks in when is it? July next year. So we still have a long way to go.
Perfect. Thank you, Philip. Just turning on to the next question that we have here. Does Tamarin have enough money to complete the proposed 2023 drilling program?
Wow. That's a question I guess you're going to ask Tamarin. The last time I looked, they had about 29 million Aussie, so about $20 million US at the end of March. But like I said, that's a question you've got to put to them. This 2 well program, and we're still carried. They probably need more money than that, but I'm sure they've got plans in terms of how they're going to do that and get on and drill. So, I mean, the fact we're moving forward on approving a work program with them on a 2 well program, we're pretty confident they'll certainly be there with us as our partner and having the funds to do so.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Why are you moving away from a Mungie area to Shenandoah? If you say that there is no reservoir quality issue, then why take the risk of moving to a deeper location?
Tom, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that one. The Shenandoah is about, as Philip said, it's about 60 kilometers south of the Mungie, but it's also in a deeper area as well. It's going to be about 800 meters deeper. So we'd have a little bit higher absolute pressure. And based on what Tamarin's learned from their wells that are to the east, the Tanumbirini wells that are operated by Santos, they believe that we believe that the production potential could be a little higher than the Mungie area given that depth. But, we absolutely want to go back to the Mungie area. We haven't condemned it in any form or fashion.
Thanks, Tom. And Philip, perhaps 2 final pre-submitted questions, perhaps for you here. Are the 2 proposed wells horizontal?
Absolutely. Yeah. We won't be drilling vertical. We might have to do a pilot vertical at the Shenandoah location. In fact, we probably will. But no, these are 2, at least 1,000 meters. We might do a little bit more, but yeah, we're looking at 2 1,000 meters to go in and frack those and get that kind of 3,000 MCF a day commercial flow rate. So yeah, 2 horizontal wells, 1,000 meters each.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And the final pre-submitted question that we have here asks, Tamarin mentioned a H&P rig recently. What is the status of this rig?
Yeah, the H&P rig is a US rig. It's a pretty big rig. Tom probably knows a bit more of the technical data of this rig, but it is a big, powerful rig. It'll be able to drill longer, deeper wells in the basin than the previous rigs we've used. That rig was brought into country in Darwin, I think around about April. So it's in country, it's ready to go, and it will be the rig the JV is going to use to drill this 2 well program in 2023. So.
Perfect. Philip, Tom, thank you very much for that. And that actually concludes the pre-submitted questions. And ladies and gentlemen on the call, if I could please ask you to now submit your questions to put forward to the team. And Philip, Tom, perhaps if there are any topics in the Q&A tab on the right-hand side that we haven't covered, or perhaps you'd like to add a bit more colour to, if I could please hand back to you just to read out those questions and give responses where it's appropriate to do so. And I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake. Tom, you can see your questions, I presume. So do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, I'll head back up there. I was scrolling down. Sorry about that.
Okay, getting ahead of yourself.
The question is, won't there be completion issues elsewhere in the prospect? Are these completion issues specific to this block? We don't think the completion issues are specific to this block. We think it was an issue with completion fluid. And so once we confirm the root causes via the lab and get some recommended solutions to go forward, we think we can alleviate those issues. It's not a guarantee, as I said before, but it's we're going to be constantly learning. But yeah, I think we won't have to. They're not specific to this block. Sorry.
No. So maybe Tom, the next two questions, you can take them together if you wouldn't mind. Sorry, just give it time to read them, maybe just.
So the one question is, what are the flow rates did we expect? You say you know what went wrong. Can this well be cleaned up and deliver higher rates, or do you have to move to another well? And then the second question, is there any thought that the Amungi 2 can be cleaned up and eventually produce 3 million cubic feet a day? It's certainly possible. But the JV is going to have to evaluate whether we spend the money, the time, and the effort right now to try to clean up that well. Seeing how we're not selling gas out there right now. If we were in a position where we were be able to turn these wells to production, you would certainly go out and do that work right away. But this gives us time to think about it, come up with the best course of action, and decide if we need to spend that money right now.
So the next question, what are the capital commitments for the next two wells for Falcon, and where will that leave the net cash position? So, you look at these wells, they cost 30 odd million Aussie dollars to drill and complete and frack. We're at 22.5%. So you got two wells, maybe 30, including a bit of, it might be up to 40 million Aussie dollars for these initial wells. The fortunate thing is our commitment is anywhere between 22.5% and zero. And that's because of this late, the more recently negotiated position we executed last October. So we can tailor, and our plan is to go in at 22.5%. Okay. And if we do go in at 22.5%, well, we still get carried for a large portion of the first well. We will not be carried for the second well because it's falling into the end of 2023. There is, as I said earlier, further carry that starts in July, that the next well drill anywhere after the 1st of July next year. About half of that cost will be carried for on that. So, our commitment is flexible. We have 16 million cash on the balance sheet. So we're not running out of money anytime soon. And we've got more than enough to pay our share to drill these two wells this year and to see ourselves out at the end of this year between cash and carry. And then net position, I'm not quite sure. It's a bit early stage because we're still working through the numbers with Tamarin. And that's why we haven't signed off this two-well program. We're still going through and fine-tuning those numbers. So we won't have $16 million left in the bank at the end of the year, but we'll still be in a good, strong position, and hopefully at that stage have positive flow rates. Next question from Gary: when will we see the stock shares start to rise higher? Well, I'm sorry, Gary, that should have been today, and it's not. So I know the pain of shareholders, and many of you have been shareholders for many years, and it is another setback. So when will you see it rise? You're not going to see it rise substantially beyond where it was yesterday. And a rise back to yesterday's level is not a rise. You're not going to see a rise beyond yesterday's level until you see commercial flow rates. And, with the program we're putting in place, we'd expect to see commercial flow rates by the end of this year. So that should translate into a higher share price. Next one, has Falcon financial commitments to 2 new wells been estimated? I think I've kind of answered that as best I can. And it's, as I said, it's variable. Thanks for all the work. Why did we announce these results and not Tamarin? Interesting question. We're regulated by the AIM in London and the TSXV in Canada. Tamarin are regulated by the ASX in Australia. And we even know between Canada, I don't know the Australian regulatory rules in terms of timing and release and time to release of information. But I certainly know what it looks like in AIM, and Flynn knows very well what it looks like in both AIM and in Toronto. And we work by the guidelines that's given to us and the advice we receive, particularly from our Nomad in London and our lawyer in Calgary. So we had information. We were waiting for the lab results that we only kind of got back Tuesday/Wednesday this week. So we could come back and tell you a fuller story. We can't come out and tell you a half a story. And we had that more or less full story, even though there's more lab work still to go on. And we may get more lab results next week. And perhaps Tamarin took a slightly different view that they want to have the next bit of the story from the lab next week before they go out. But I can't really speak for them as to why they, that's the only thing I can hint at, that's probably why they didn't put out anything today. I'll take this question here. You have failed as CEO to deliver one commercial well or increase any shareholder value since the moratorium. What do you say to all those who have supported you for years via their hard-earned cash, which continues to erode under your leadership? Fair question in one way, but you've got to understand we're the non-operator. So much of what happens is outside the control of Falcon. What Falcon has delivered and time again is negotiating good deals, certainly since I've been involved in 2013 in getting rid of Hess, 2014 bringing in Origin, 2020 getting a top up of about 100+ million of carry from Origin, 22 getting Sheffield on board for 20 million, end of 22 getting this negotiated settlement out of Tamarin / Daily Waters and an extra $30 million. They're the things I can control. I can't control the geology. I can't control the operation. Fail as a CEO, that's your view, but I can only do what that's in my control to do. So, but thank you for your question. So, Tom, I think you've answered the next one. The probability 2H damage can be corrected. I think that's been answered.
Right. I think the same with the next one.
Next one, the same. How much blame do you give to yourself and the second-rate frack company you used? Gosh, I didn't know we used a second-rate frack company. I know it wasn't the household name of Schlumberger that everybody knows. And again, blaming myself, unfortunately, I can't control operations. I'm not in the driving seat of the bus. I'm in the back row seat. We're passengers on this bus. And as for the frack company, no. I mean, the completion operation wasn't a frack company issue. It was, the completion itself, but the frack company issue wasn't part of that problem. Next one, what is the plan if Tamarin can't raise new cash? I don't like these what if questions because they're kind of like, we could forever try and find what would happen here and there. I'm going to pass on that. I'm just assuming they're going to confidently, and I hope they do, raise their money. As to what happens if they don't, well, we'll deal with that. I mentioned excited about the forward program. What specifically gives them confidence in that program that we won't see a repeat of the current results? Well, the confidence I have is the same confidence I had 6 months ago. The geology here, and Tom has looked at it long enough, and I'm not a geologist, but the geology here is great. The reservoir is great. The quality of it has never been in question. We have a 2-well program. That's why I'm excited. And, will we see a repeat of the current results? No, I think we've learned a lot. Tamarin has learned a lot. Daily Waters, our other partner that work closely with Tamarin, have learned a lot, and hopefully they'll be more involved in how wells are completed going forward. So no, I'm confident, excited, and certainly both from the geology and the reservoir, and also excited about the program and confident we won't repeat these mistakes and completion errors again.
Yeah, if I may add too, Philip, yeah, we, the 2H well, along with the 1H, proves that we have a working hydrocarbon system here that can deliver gas. And the challenges going forward is to how do you deliver economic or commercial rates of gas. And we still have that optimism and confidence, I guess, that we'll be able to do that.
So now, next question, although we have been carried forever, thank you, as you say, we have yet to see any commercial wells, true. How can we raise money with a stock price so low? Good news is we don't need to. We don't need to do today, we don't need to do tomorrow, and given the flexibility where we can move our percent from 22.5% down to 0 or at 10 or 5 or 15 to meet our capital position or whatever, we can always tailor that up and down depending on what the market's appetite is for putting more money. We don't need to be raising money with the stock price so low. Our next time we'll be raising money will be 2024, and we'll have the results of 2 wells. And if these wells come in, we won't have a low stock share price. If the wells don't come in, wow, we've got a different problem, which we don't anticipate, because as I said in my previous answer, we're very, excited and confident of the next 2 well program. What are expectations how Tamarin will come up with their level of funding? Look, I'm not going to get in much more about Tamarin and what happens if they don't, because these are all kind of hypothetical questions. Next one, why weren't we informed earlier about the problems we have with this well? Well, today is the earliest we could have informed you. So we work very closely with our advisors on timing and making sure that the market is up to date in a timely manner. And when we had the poor results, we needed to understand what that meant, and we needed to go out and tell the market the full story. So, and that full story we only got like Wednesday night. So by the time we prepared, Tuesday night, I think it was actually 2 a.m. if I'm not mistaken, by the time I finished on the 21st of June. And then we just put a press release together and get it out as soon as possible. So it could not have been done any sooner. Any significant overrun in the anticipated well costs? No. I mean, the well costs are high, but I mean, they're done pretty much on budget, no real overruns. So, the additional cost now might be in terms of, do we go after a cleanup costs, and what would that actually mean? Somebody moving on to any prospects for South Africa. 2010, we launched our application. So maybe next year, or as Rory McElroy says, I feel like I'm getting closer. But look, it goes on and on. I mean, the good news actually is very recently, the South African Geological Survey conducted their own drilling, not a full exploration well, but a borehole, but at depth down to about 3,500 meters. And they've got themselves excited about the potential of the Crew, which is great. I'm talking to people I talk to in South Africa. There are still, significant moves towards getting this famous bill through Parliament. The bill has been drafted; it's ready to go. And once that bill is approved by Parliament, they're back then in awarding contracts. But I've been saying it for 11 years next year, and some year it might just be. I mean, the prospectivity of the Crew is fantastic. And should we get awarded a license, we'll grab it, and then we'll bring in, a good partner. And there's 2 or 3 very obvious choices that we'd love to bring in. So, Tom, maybe you might take the next. Thank you.
Yep. Based on U.S. early stage exploration experiences, examples, are there similar experiences to this well with the completion issues, where there was ultimately success in the well and the basin as a whole? Pardon me. Yes, of course. The one that comes to mind, and I worked the Barnett Shale for quite a while, both with Burlington Resources and then with Chesapeake Energy. The Barnett, George Mitchell and Mitchell Exploration for years tried to crack the code on the Barnett Shale. They had drilled the Barnett, and we always had gas shows in the Barnett. We knew it was a good source rock, and Mitchell ended up proving with slick water fracs that it could be commercial. Now, at Burlington and at Chesapeake, we started out drilling. I'll put them in 3,000 foot or 1,000 meter wells, and our first wells we completed as horizontals, we would do 300 meter stages. Well, that over time, and those were okay wells, but over time the completion strategy evolved, and we drilled longer laterals, and we ended up drilling or completing much shorter stages and putting more sand in. So absolutely, the Barnett has been a success in the sweet spots of the Barnett, and no basin that I can think of drilled their best well first.
So, thank you. Next one. Could you address how the recently announced LNG facility for Tamarin will impact the pace of progress to commerciality? How do you get to commerciality? You drill commercial flowing wells. There's no doubt, though, Tamarin have a plan, and it's a plan to get to commerciality and get to commercial production as quickly as possible. The LNG is a bigger part of that, but that's a kind of 2030 plan. We have a lot of work to do before now in 2030. So I think it's nice and good and all the rest that they're out there, doing a land grab in the middle arm in terms of land to build an LNG facility, but it's not going to change the pace. They're going to go after this as hard and as fast as absolutely possible. And that's actually one of their key focuses, is turning this into commercial production and not just drilling wells for wells' sake. The LNG is just part of their overall bigger plan to get into production. So, chances of Brian Sheffield making a bid for Falcon. He owns 15% of the company. He's got, I can't remember the percent, maybe 15 or more percent of Tamarin. He owns a bit of Empire. He owns 38.75% of the acres. He's got overriding royalties. He's invested $100 million cash of his own money in the Beetaloo. Making a bid for Falcon doesn't make any sense. I can't speak on behalf of what his plans might be, but chances, no, I think pretty low. The next one is even, is it possible Sheffield advised the incorrect techniques of fracking to Tamarin, knowing the results would hammer stock price to put pressure on Tamarin and Falcon? No. One, Tamarin, the operator, and Brian certainly wasn't advising them. That's the first thing. Two, Tom, you know Brian a lot longer than I do. That's certainly not how he does business. He's a fantastic businessman, but no, he certainly wouldn't do business that way. So is it possible? No, absolutely not possible. Not at all, not even remotely possible, no.
Agreed.
Would you agree to suspend further issuance of stock options and share dilution until share prices recover to some kind of return for shareholder? I've been an investor since 2009 and share price today is about half. Let me just get to the end of the question. I'm based at that time. We're not out to issue shares at this level. So would I agree to suspend further issuance of stock? Yes, absolutely. You'll note a resolution was passed today for the annual approval of the stock option plan. Please note that is not an approval to grant stock options. That's just an annual approval of the stock option plan that is required. We will not be issuing stock options at these levels. We will not be issuing stock options until we have success. So yes, I can agree to suspend. Absolutely. Tom, you're a director of the board. I think you might agree with that.
Yep. Absolutely.
Thank you for making sure that there has not been a false market in Falcon shares beyond today, and we fully complied with AIM and TSX. The relationship with Brian Sheffield remained good, and do we have similar views on what has caused, do we have similar views on what has caused us issues here? So look, our relationship with Brian is fantastic. Tom, you've known him for, I don't know how many years?
Almost 10.
10 years. I've only known him for, 2 years or less. Our relationship is great. We have a very transparent relation, not just with Tom, but his entire team at Daily Waters. And we've got a huge amount of mutual respect. A lot of that, comes from Tom's 10-year relationship, but we're very transparent with Brian. So, our relationship with him is very good. In terms of do we have similar views on what the issues here are? Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say too that the lab results that are ongoing are being run by Daily Waters because of the proximity of the lab to Brian's team in Austin, Texas, rather than being run by Tamarin. So when they're seeing those and they're talking to Tom, because obviously Tom lives in Austin as well. So they absolutely agree with the views that we have gleaned from the lab analysis. I don't know, Tom, if you want to add anything else to that answer.
Yeah, it's a lab that Parsley Energy had used prior to, and yeah.
And then the last question is the Hungarian property ever going to be drilled? We're never going to drill it. We did that back in whatever 2005, 6, 7, 8. So no, we're not. It's still there on care and maintenance. Somebody every now and again has a look at it, particularly where the gas prices might spike. And but no, we'll never drill it. So I think that's it, Jake. So
Philip.
back to you.
Philip, Tom, absolutely. And thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time then, addressing all of those questions that came in from investors this afternoon. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. And we'll publish all those responses out on the Investor Meet Company platform. But Philip, perhaps before redirecting those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Jake. And again, thank you, Tom, for coming on and helping with some of those questions. And again, to our shareholders, look at guys, I wish it was much better news. And, you've been incredibly patient shareholders. I've got to know a lot of you personally over the last several years. And, this news isn't what we expected. It's not what you want to be reading this morning. And it is, a setback, but that's all it is, a setback. We've had multiple setbacks. Is this the last setback? I hope in the short, medium term, absolutely. And, we're as ever as confident, Tom and I and everyone else involved, Brian Sheffield and his team, Tamarin and their team, we're as confident as we have ever been on the chances of success, of real commercial success in the Beetaloo. And we have a program going forward. So we are going to be drilling and getting back out and hopefully delivering positive results by the end of the year. But it is another setback, and it's another 6 months that you're going to have to wait and see, will this really come good? But again, thank you all for certainly for attending today. And thank you all for your massive patience as Falcon shareholders.
Philip, Tom, thank you very much indeed for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This won't take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Falcon Oil and Gas Limited, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good afternoon to you all.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all.